Can Zhen Huan, blessed with both beauty and talent, truly outshine all in the imperial harem and enjoy everlasting favor? The matter of Princess Wen-yi was resolved 3 days later. Xiao Tang, the person in charge of pastry ingredients in the imperial kitchen, confessed that it was due to his negligence in mixing up 2 kinds of flour that caused the princess to feel unwell. When the news came, I was embroidering a double-sided embroidery with Ling Rong on a black ebony frame, stretching a piece of snow-white silk. Double-sided embroidery is most demanding in terms of needlework skills, and the embroiderer's visual and mental focus, requiring thousands of threads to be hidden within the embroidery without a trace. An extra stitch, a missing stitch, a crooked stitch, or a slanted stitch could distort or change the color of the pattern. We were embroidering a picture of a distant journey in the spring mountains, with hundreds of shades of green that nearly dazzled the eyes, causing a slight dizziness after prolonged viewing. Through the lake green chiffon curtains, a shadowy green hue covered the floor. Outside the curtains, Jin Shi and the palace maids were airing out the large pieces of brightly patterned fabric sent by the Internal Affairs Department, stirring up the delicate butterfly patterns in the shadows, making them flutter and twinkle. The light and shadow danced together, as if capturing the last moments of summer. I stood up, rubbing my sore neck, and took a sip of fragrant mint drink, asking, "What do you think?" Ling Rong, comparing silk thread colors in the sunlight with a faint smile at the corner of her mouth, said, "This must be the coincidence that Consort Hua spoke of." I laughed lightly. "Why speak in such a roundabout way?" Ling Rong put down the silk thread, pursed her lips and said, "Yes, following sister's orders." Then she slowly explained, "The emperor wanted a thorough investigation and Xiao Tang confessed. But it was just someone not wanting the emperor to continue the investigation and manipulated it behind the scenes. However, she was puzzled. But the emperor punished Xiao Tang for negligence of duty and had him executed." I held the fragrant mint drink in my hand, watching the busy figures of the palace maids outside the curtains, and said lightly, "Of course he had to be executed. Continuing the investigation would lead to a scandal in the palace, which is a minor issue if it reaches the censors and the Empress Dowager. But in the eyes of the subjects, it could damage the royal family's dignity." I chewed on the mint slowly and said, "We all understand the ins and outs. How could the emperor not understand? But he cannot take action against her for now." Seeing Ling Rong's puzzled look, I pointed towards the southwest direction of the window screen, and she immediately understood, sighing softly, "Even the emperor has so many helplessness." I curled my finger slightly, tucking a lock of hair behind my ear, and said word by word, "When the cunning rabbit is dead, the hunting dog is cooked. I'm just waiting for the day when the Murong family is no longer needed." Ling Rong was silent for a moment, then picked up a fragrant medicine grape and chewed it slowly, saying, "Ling Rong just feels sorry for sister's hardships." I said, "How can it not be hard at the pinnacle of glory and favor?" Ling Rong clapped her hands and laughed. "But the emperor has been really good to sister these past few days." She paused. "Actually, the emperor is very good to sister." Hearing this, I recalled the conversation I had with Xian Ling the other afternoon. He held me on his knee as we both peeled and ate water chestnuts, our temples rubbing against each other, our hands like delicate jade, speaking softly in such a picturesque scene. I whispered in his ear, "Why does fourth brother believe that Huan is innocent?" He was peeling a water chestnut, apparently not used to doing this, peeling it awkwardly, leaving patches of the deep red skin on the snow-white flesh. He said, "You are fourth brother's Huan. As your husband, how could I not believe you?" Feeling a warm comfort in my heart, I playfully scolded, "Just for that? No wonder all the concubines say fourth brother is biased towards me. It seems true." He put down the water chestnut and said earnestly, Huan wouldn't do such a thing." Holding my hand, he said, "Then why don't you cut open my heart and see whether it's biased towards you or others?" My face flushed and I retorted lightly, "Speaking so thoughtlessly even as an emperor, it's embarrassing." He simply smiled, not replying, and placed a peeled water chestnut in my mouth, asking, "Is it good?" I frowned and swallowed with difficulty. "It's astringent, not cleanly peeled." I couldn't help but laugh again. Fourth brother holds the power of the universe. How could he be used to doing such things? It's better to leave these small water chestnuts to Huan. Saying so, I peeled several pieces cleanly and placed them in his hand. He laughed. Sweet and crisp, extraordinarily refreshing. Your hands are indeed more skillful. I smiled. This is a water chestnut from the south, crisp and fresh, fragrant in every bite. Naturally extraordinary. As we spoke, Xianling ate a few more, slowly closing his eyes to savor. The taste of these water chestnuts is clear but not greasy, just like your music and dance. I laughed out loud, greedy, always wanting more. The old saying is indeed true. After peeling chestnuts for you, now you want me to play music and dance. He couldn't help but smile. Why can't I think about your dance for no reason? Then he said, even if you wanted to dance, I wouldn't allow it. It would be too uncomfortable to sweat so much. I exclaimed. Others are praised for their cool and sweat-free jade-like skin. Are you mocking me for being a sweaty person made of water? I deliberately turned away, ignoring him until he coaxed and pleaded, and then I turned back to smile at him. Reflecting for a moment, I suddenly felt that it was not the time to be silent and reflective. I should say something, or else it would seem like I was neglecting Ling Rong, as if showing off something to her. So I said with a smile, the emperor is also very good to you, sister. Ling Rong suddenly showed a nearly sorrowful expression, staring blankly at the hundreds of dazzling green silk threads on the embroidery frame, carefully straightening them one by one. I found her expression strange, considering Xianling was also kind to her, and as a favored concubine, she should have no complaints. However, Ling Rong is more sensitive than others, so it was not good to ask directly. After a while, she smiled and said, Sister, why suddenly take up such a troublesome task? It's so labor-intensive and taxing. I stepped forward, quietly observing for a while, and caressed the smooth embroidery fabric. It is indeed a laborious task. But the more demanding a task is, the more it tests a person's intellect and endurance. Ling Rong said, Sister always speaks so profoundly. Ling Rong doesn't understand how embroidery relates to wisdom. I replaced her tea and sat back down to embroider, saying gently, sometimes not understanding is a blessing. It's best to never understand. Ling Rong smiled and changed the subject. Sister has taken up double-sided embroidery on a whim. I wonder how many days it will take. In a few days, we'll have to return to the palace, which might require a lot of effort. I kept my head down, embroidering without looking up, let alone an embroidery frame. Even if I wanted to move all the withered lotuses in front of Yifu Pavilion to Taiyi Pond, who would dare to say no to my face? Ling Rong clapped her hands and laughed. Exactly. I'm afraid even if Sister wanted to combine Fanyu Lake with Taiyi Pond, the Emperor would only say it's a good idea. I couldn't help but laugh. How have you also learned to be so slick with words? After embroidering for a while, my hands began to sweat, and I was afraid of staining the silk threads, so I got up to wash my hands. Outside, Huan was carefully choosing the colors for this season's clothes, her green dress fluttering like a new lotus leaf under the sunlight. The small pearl earrings I recently gave her, the size of her little finger, twinkled with her every movement like starlight. Suddenly, I remembered something, as if recalling a glimmer of bright light amidst the strange twists in the Shenda Hall, and how dark and cruel the truth behind that light was, making me hesitant to uncover it even with a glance. Yet, unable to resist. If it were true, it would be like allowing someone else to sleep beside my pillow, or like hanging a sharp blade over my head, as precarious as stacking eggs. Taking a deep breath, I called out, Huan Bai. Huan Bai came in and asked, Miss, do you want to change the tea and fruits? I looked at her and smiled. Didn't you go to the imperial kitchen last time to get tapioca flour to make pearl balls? Make some as a snack. Huan Bai was slightly startled. Miss, why suddenly think of eating that? After the last incident, I felt it was unclean and threw it all away. Oh, what a coincidence. I was just thinking about that taste. I said, well, never mind, just make something else then. I turned to ask Ling Rong, how about we have some of the chestnut cake awarded by the Emperor today? And another bowl of 8 treasure sweet porridge, does that sound good? Ling Rong replied obediently, Sister, whatever you decide is fine. After having snacks with Ling Rong, we disbanded. Watching the palace maids and eunuchs pack up for the return to the palace made me feel a bit better, and I went back to embroidering. The tranquility lasted until the Mid-Autumn Festival after our return to the palace. By tradition, the Mid-Autumn Festival is spent in Zio City. The date for our return was set for the 5th day of the 8th lunar month. The procession of the consorts and concubines was different from when we left. Mei Zhuang's carriage was strictly guarded, and she couldn't easily alight. Consort Hua's carriage, adorned with emerald feathers and green phoenixes, followed closely behind the Empress's phoenix carriage, majestic and impressive, dispelling the dejected air of the journey. Consort K, Consort Fengshui, and noble Consort Xian followed, with me and Chao Jieyu side by side, and Ling Rong following behind. It took 2 days of travel by carriage to return to Zhou City. Despite being in a carriage, I felt exhausted. Fortunately, everything in Tongli Palace was well prepared, and after a quick wash, I fell into a confused sleep. The Mid-Autumn Festival rituals were elaborate. Xianling hosted a banquet for court officials outside, and later, a family feast was held in the harem, which the Empress organized vibrantly. The eldest prince, Yu Li, along with the princesses Xu He and Wen Yi, were delightfully charming under the doting gaze of their elders. As per tradition, the family feast was held in Huiguang Hall, the first hall behind the main gate of the inner palace, attended by princes and noblewomen from both inside and outside the court. The Empress Dowager seemed in high spirits and was accompanied by several imperial consorts. She sat facing south on her throne, with the imperial consorts seated on either side. A stage was set up south of the hall for performances and a variety of entertainments. The Emperor and Empress, along with the concubines, princes and princesses, offered tea and wine, celebrating the Empress Dowager's long life. After the toasts, everyone returned to their seats. The celebratory music played over and over, with the singers in the orchestra using their powerful voices to sing praises and good wishes. As the most venerable elder of this prominent and noble family, the Empress Dowager naturally enjoyed a glory and pride that others could not fathom. This was my first time seeing the Empress Dowager, whom I had imagined countless times in my mind. Despite being far from her throne, I couldn't suppress my admiration and longing for her, influenced by the varied rumors I had heard. These rumors had painted a picture of her in my mind as a solemn, imposing figure, the foremost noblewoman of the court. However, seeing her serene and calm demeanor in person was somewhat surprising. For this family feast, her attire was luxurious but not overly formal, adorned with simple, refreshing patterns in aqua and gold, with only jade and pearls in her hair and minimal makeup. The Empress Dowager was not strikingly beautiful, but perhaps due to her devotion to Buddhism, she radiated a noble and detached aura that was deeply impressive. Despite being the most exalted woman of the dynasty and living a life far beyond ordinary reach, her face bore a slight weariness, perhaps from her excessive devotion to Buddhism. The Empress Dowager seemed pleased with the many concubines below her and said to Xianling, "The emperor must be fair to all, to ensure the prosperity of the imperial lineage." She also advised the empress, "As the head of the harem, you must take good care of the emperor and ensure he has no worries." The emperor and empress acknowledged her commands. The Empress Dowager then had a conversation about viewing the moon with them. Although the empress was her niece, the interaction was polite but distant, confirming the rumors of the Empress Dowager's lack of affection for the empress. With the Prince of Runan away on a campaign in the southwest, only his wife Consort He was present. The Empress Dowager then kindly advised her, "With your husband away, you must take good care of yourself and the heir." She then ordered gifts to be given to Consort He, who gratefully bowed in thanks for the Empress Dowager's concern. The Empress Dowager also kindly praised Xian Fan, saying, "I've heard Fan is doing very well in poetry, literature and martial arts. As a mother, I am relieved." She then complimented consorts Shun Chun and Zhuang He on their son's upbringing. Since Prince Xian Fan, born to a lowly mother, was raised by consort Zhuang He, her joy was evident in her tearful response. Since Xian Qing had been raised by the Empress Dowager after consort Xu left the palace, she showed him particular affection, inviting him to sit beside her and joking, "Qing worries me the most. It would be good to find someone to marry you off to, as a way of fulfilling my duty to your mother." Xian Qing smiled. "Rest assured, mother, once I find the one I truly admire, I will marry her and bring her to pay respects to you. But the one I admire is truly rare." The Empress Dowager then turned to Xianling with a smile. "Hear this, Emperor. Let Qing choose slowly from the virtuous ladies of the court. If necessary, we can overlook a lower family status, as long as she is virtuous." Qianqing merely smiled without a word, and Xianling said, "Mother, don't worry. Perhaps he'll find his heart's desire tomorrow." The Empress Dowager smiled helplessly. "I hope so, and we'll have to let him be." As the Empress Dowager began to show signs of fatigue, she decided to return to her palace first. The imperial consorts, who seemed to have great respect for her, noticed her tiredness and promptly accompanied her back. The family feast was then overseen by the emperor and empress. The seating was arranged according to the ranks of the concubines, and I was not seated close to Xianling. From a distance, I saw him sitting side by side with the empress, his imperial yellow brocade robe accentuating his regal appearance. I smiled at him from afar, and he evidently saw me, returning the smile with a fond look that seemed to stretch across the distance. In the midst of the public gathering, I felt my cheeks flush with shyness, and I bowed my head to take a sip of wine. When I looked up again, Xianling was conversing with the empress. I noticed Qianqing taking advantage of the moment when no one was paying attention, subtly raising his cup to me. We shared a knowing smile, and I lifted my cup to drink. Throughout the meal, Xianling frequently glanced at me, instructing Li Zhang to share dishes from his table with me, many of which were my favorites. Despite the formality that prevented conversation, the sentiment was warmly conveyed, lifting my spirits. Once the family feast concluded, it was natural for Xianling to spend the mid-autumn night in the Empress's Zhaoyang palace, while the concubines returned to their respective palaces to rest. Seated in my palanquin, the effects of the wine began to surface, my cheeks burning hot and my body feeling languid. Leaning on my hand for a while, I looked up to see the moon exceptionally beautiful, like a round ice disk suspended in the dark blue velvet sky, bright and clear. The moonlight, reflecting on my skirt and bayou jade ornaments, appeared even more lustrous and warm. The bayou representing paired fish seemed especially poignant on such a round moon night. Yet here I was alone, casting a double shadow, feeling a chill as I heard the sound of egrets gliding over the Taiyi pond, turning the bright moonlight into a dim reflection on the water scattered with duckweed and water chestnut leaves. After returning to Ing Exine Hall from the banquet, Lu Zhu and Huan Bai helped me change out of my ceremonial attire and remove my heavy makeup, washing my face clean. I touched my face, noting, "It's quite hot, I indeed drank too much tonight." Lu Zhu giggled. "It's not the wine that intoxicates but the person themselves. The emperor paid so much attention to you during the feast that even the recently favored and Marin couldn't divert his attention." I scolded, "Don't talk nonsense." Huan Bai, slightly startled, smiled as before. "Is that so?" Lu Zhu chimed in. "You weren't there, so you didn't see it." Consort Hua was so jealous her eyes nearly popped out. She laughed. "It's good to put her in her place, so she knows your importance in the emperor's heart and doesn't get too arrogant." I glared at her. "Watch what you're saying. Even in our own palace, we need to be cautious." Lu Zhu then became more reserved and quietly acknowledged my reminder. As Huan Bai carefully hung up my ceremonial robe, she remarked, "The emperor has always been very good to Our Lady." Hearing this warmed my heart slightly, but also brought a faint chill.
Follow us to avoid getting lost and enjoy endless exciting stories. For more content, please go to the Story Wall homepage to view more exciting novels.